A short video to answer a question that came in asking, can you play a continuum through an external controller, maybe through a DAW, maybe through a keyboard, instrument, anything you like, playing a Continuum or ContinuuMini through an external MIDI interface, and use a pedal to control some aspects of that sound in the EaganMatrix without touching the fingerboard? And the answer is, at least in 9.0, I think, and later, yes, certainly you can in releases after 9.0. So I have a slim Continuum hooked up here. I could have done this with a ContinuuMini. It would have been the same. And what I'll do is I'll go into MIDI and global settings. And for this example, I'm going to set my external one, music data input, to the name of my external MIDI keyboard, which is USB 02 in this case. This could be any external MIDI input. It could be an instrument, it could be any MIDI controller, it could be the USB DAW interface that you have connected. And you don't even have to use MIDI and global settings external music data input. You could use a MIDI host in the case of a Slim or a ContinuuMini and play the instrument directly through MIDI in that case. There's no difference in terms of how that will affect things here. I've created a simple oscillator with some formulas on it. Let's remove those for a second and just create an oscillator with X frequency control routed to SLSR with the standard Z pressure function. This is, in fact, the standard utility sine wave. I can play a note on my keyboard, and it will play the ContinuuMini or Continuum fine. As long as I'm playing on channel 1 and my preset is set to MPE or MPE plus, I can play polyphonically from this external input without having to use an MPE controller, which would normally play in channels 2 to N. So I have my sound set up. Next thing I want to do is create a couple formulas that will change this sound in some way. The first formula is just a W constant that goes from 0 to 0.87 that I set on spectral balance. So this is basically going to change the timbre of this oscillator from a sine tone to a very sawtooth-like sound. And I'm going to set that to my first control. And I'll go into my editor and set a string now so I can set my control to something meaningful. In firmware versions after 9.0, we can actually set arbitrary strings for the control graphics, which is wonderful because now you can make them say whatever you like. To do that, I'll just set my base name of the control, and then I can put an underscore up to 12 of them, and they can be any string or number that you like. So in this case, I'm going to set my first control for timbre, and I'll have a string that will go through the full range of the control that will say sine to saw. I'll also create another one that I'll set in a second that will be a harmonic, and I'll set that to numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And we can go out of there, and now when I look at my controls, you'll see I have two of them. One is set as timbre, and that will go from sine to saw. Remember, these controls really underlying go from a MIDI value of 0 to 127. You can always see that in the value above the control. And the second control that I set says harmonic, and that will go through the values 1 to 10. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set a pedal to each one of these. I'll go to my control panel. After 9.0, we have 3 different control panels that can come up. Instead of putting everything on the same page to make it look less cramped, you can now switch between these panels. The second panel allows you to set your pedal assignments. I'm going to set the first pedal. I have 2 continuous pedals set up here. The first one I'm going to set to control I. I'll make it go through the full range of 0 to 127. And the second one I'm going to set to control 2, and I'll do the same thing for that. Set that 0 to 127. Now I can set intermediate ranges if I want. I could have this go from value 57 to 102 if I wanted to. So I have my pedal assignments. I have a formula that's going to change with the pedal because I've assigned the pedal to this control. I'll turn on my other formula, and what this does is it starts with a value of 1, and it goes from a value of 0 to 9.1. The 0.1 will become obvious in a second. And this I've set to control 2, and I've set the ancillary function on this to quantize to a value of 1. So as I turn up this control, it's only going to give me values 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, because I want to create a whole number, harmonic number, that will be multiplied by this frequency. Basically, with my pedal, I'll be increasing harmonics from 1 to 10. And on the other pedal, I'm going to be changing the timbre of this tone. Now, the reason why I put 0.1 here, if I go a little bit higher, I'll go through this full quantized range. If I just stop this at 10, the quantization will not hit exactly 10. It's just something you have to remember when you use quantize. Always go a little bit further than the last number you want to, and you'll quantize to the last number in your scheme. Okay, that's it. So I have a note that I can play. When I trigger my pedals, I have two of them connected. One pedal is going to change the timbre. The other pedal is going to create a number that will be a frequency multiplier that will basically create a harmonic off the bass frequency that I'm playing. Let's hold a tone on the keyboard. I'm not touching the fingerboard. Let me cycle through the timbre with the pedal. Changing the spectral balance in this way sounds very much like opening up a filter. Let's use the other pedal. I'll hold a note, and that one should jump it through the harmonic series. One of the things you can hear is I'm not affecting the volume of this sound in any way. So the initial volume that I play on the keyboard, that's going to be the volume that I'll sustain through my sound. I don't have to just activate these two controls with a pedal. I can assign a pedal to other things that would affect the sound in a preset as well. Here we can see I can have that pedal affect the gain. I can have that pedal affect the audio of an AS input. That only applies to Continuum and Continuum Slim. I can affect the recirculator with the pedal. After 9.0, there's no difference between these two gen functions. They're actually called G1 and G2 now, versus any of the other 4 control functions. They all act identically in 9.5x. I would limit it to that for now. Gain, recirculator, and the 6 controls. Sustain does not appear to work, and some of the others like round rate don't really apply for an external source. But you should be able to do a lot applying pedals to one of the 6 controls. And you can use any preset that has a control and assign a pedal to it, and that will likely work as well. You don't have to limit this to presets that you make yourself. The last thing to look at is, though I've been triggering with a keyboard, a lot of times you want to see what your formulas are doing. And normally you'll go to this formula option and say show formula. But if I press the keyboard and then trigger the pedal, you see my formula doesn't change. That formula display is only active if you press the fingerboard. So let me turn on the surface display. Here I'll press a note on the fingerboard now, and now I'll trigger the pedal. And you can see that I can see my formula. So that's just a quick video to show you can trigger your Continuum through external MIDI, and you can manipulate the sound with a pedal or some other controller. I could have set up a beat step or a Haken controller to change the control here, and it would have done the same thing. Hope that was useful.